We're going to go ahead and get started. If you're just joining us, make sure you log into the Menti there. Welcome to Skills for Success series, I guess. Today is test taking strategies. So hopefully there's going to be a few takeaways for you during this presentation. My name is Scott Fetters. I'm the SSA on the St. Augustine campus. And we also have somebody else with us, Brooke, if you want to shout out.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I am the Student Success Advisor on San Marcos campus. So it's good to see you all, including everybody from San Marcos.
So we're going to go ahead and get started here. So we're going to talk about what the presentation is, but also what it is not. This will be a general overview of how to approach the test before, during, and after. We're going to touch on all three areas. It's going to be a foundational framework. It's going to be very pragmatic. Maybe more importantly, what the presentation is not. This will not be course or content specific. We're going to try and make it as universal as possible. This, just like any singular support or resource, is not going to be a magical answer to earning an A in all of your courses. It is just one piece to the puzzle. And it won't be a deep dive on the study skills. So with that being said, let's kind of move forward and get started here. Which of these activities do you already use to support your academic success? You can vote for as many as you want. Lots of options there: study groups, open lab, faculty office hours, tutoring or supplemental instruction, same kind of thing. Avoid comparing yourself to others. Using and developing study guides, developing practice exams, studying the same subject multiple times during the week, and then maybe other. We threw that in there if there's something maybe we're missing. Okay, thank you for your responses. Next one, what are some difficulties you encounter when preparing for your exams? Of course, stress and anxiety, we see that one quite a bit.
We also see crying quite a bit. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And to be fair, that those could be tears of despair, or it could be tears of happiness.
Yeah. And a lot of these things on this slide, the things that you all input, these are things we can help you overcome as student success advisors. We're not content experts, obviously, but these are like general themes that all students, no matter what program, experience. So we're well versed in helping you get through these things, or pointing you into the right resource to help you get through these things. So that's what we're here for.
I love how this word cloud is like really populating with a lot of great stuff in here.
I saw potty on there. So someone, yeah.
Overthinking.
But again, yeah, overthinking. Burnout is, yeah, that's common. And active recall, like being hungry while you're taking the exam, juggling one class with another when you have multiple exams in 1 week, which I don't think you guys have experienced that yet, but it's probably coming your way. Yeah, so a lot of these are pretty common, and there's repeats too. So you're not the only one, if you think you're the only one that experiences this, then likely you're not.
And one more thing that I would mention, obviously, like things like stress and anxiety can have some, negative connotations, but quite honestly, when I'm, working with first term students, and they tell me that they're not stressed out or they're not feeling a little bit of anxiety, I kind of get a little concerned because this is a lot of information, a lot of adjustments. It's new, accelerated program. So some of that is to be expected. I'm not saying it feels great, but again, hopefully by the end of this presentation, we'll give you a little bit of insight on how to manage some of these things. Okay. Next question, kind of similar but different. What are some difficulties you encounter when taking the test? During? I realize we're going to get some identical answers, but previous question was kind of focused on prior. This is kind of focusing like in the moment.
Changing answers or second guessing yourself, those are common. I've seen a couple of those on here, very common. Losing focus, forgetting, same thing as the previous is kind of like that brain fog experience. Yeah, these are things we can help you unpack as your student success advisors, and also point you in the direction if you need additional resources that are available to you to help manage these things.
Active recall. I believe we touch a bit on that later.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go to the next one, Scott.
Sure. Okay. Famous quote, I knew the material, but I didn't do well on the test, right? We hear that all the time. And the official citation for that quote is pretty much all students since the beginning of time. Next slide, please. So we're going to I know we've already started the presentation, but to start the meat and potatoes of this presentation, we are going to do and review Tips 101. The reason we put these in here is because we do see instances every single term of these barriers or challenges. So arriving early, being prepared for unexpected life circumstances. Now, obviously, when you're driving to campus, your car is not going to break down every single day you drive to campus. That's not really what we're talking about, but just in general, being prepared for unexpected things and allowing extra time and arriving early. Making sure that you read the entire question on an exam comes up more often than you may think. Reading all of the options if it's multiple choice and not jumping to conclusions too quickly. Not cramming, which I believe Brooke will talk a little bit later about. And then good sleep hygiene, something that may be challenging from time to time. Next slide, please.
All right, so this brings us to the point in the presentation where we give the first passcode. Since you guys are on the live presentation, this isn't necessarily for you, but it's for the students that are watching the recording. The first passcode is Katy Perry. And yes, that is the singer Katy Perry. Okay, so before the exam, and this is what Scott mentioned a little bit earlier, is not cramming. If you are on my campus and you attended the residential orientation, I made you all raise your right hand, say your name, and swear that you would not cram. I know it's not gonna, I know it's gonna happen. I know you're gonna be tempted to cram. But this is just kind of showing you evidence that shows that cramming does not help. It also shows you that looking at the material multiple times leading up to the exam is more helpful because of something called the forgetting curve. So this is telling you why it's important to start early and to revisit the material multiple times. This graph is a visual representation of how your memory fades over time when you learn something brand new, okay? This German psychologist discovered this because he was interested in why people forget things. He discovered that the memory of something weakens over time. The biggest drop in retention of information occurs right after it is introduced. And forgetting is a natural process, but there are tools you can use to like disrupt how soon you forget things. Okay, so what does that mean for students especially? So the implications of this for college students is obvious. A day or two after attending class or reading a chapter or article, you will have forgotten approximately 75% of what you learned. And then moreover, most of the forgetting happens within the first hour of being introduced to that material. So this is why we at orientation had said it's better to be proactive for your courses. So before you go into lecture or lab, it's looking at the content that you're expected to be to know a little bit about before you go into lecture or lab. You should plan to review information consistently leading up to your exam and even after, because you have midterms, finals, things like that that cover multiple units of material. And again, cramming does not work. That is what the forgetting curve proves to us. And besides, when you cram, you usually do a data dump for the exam, and then you never look at the material again, right? So this is just encouraging you with some evidence to show you that looking at material multiple times will help you better than cramming. Okay, so how do we combat this forgetting curve? This thought that if as soon as I learn something, if I don't keep looking at it, I'm going to forget it. There's a thing called distributed practice. If you remember, we covered that at orientation. This again is studying the material several times leading up to the exam. And you don't have to, this doesn't mean you have to spend 8 hours a day on campus looking at one course, one unit, whatever that is. It's a schedule that works for you. And that's also where your student success advisor comes in for St. Augustine and San Marcos. That's myself and Scott. We can help you kind of dive into what's going to work for you. It's going to depend on what courses you're struggling with, what content you're struggling with, how much time you spend on that distributed practice piece. So you account for the demands of an accelerated program. That's what distributed practice will help with. The course load each term, it's going to change each term, cumulative exams, and then again, when you have multiple exams in 1 week or on the same day. So hopefully you've all looked at your schedule throughout the term to see when those things could potentially happen. Distributed practice you can also use study guides during that time. So it's building your own. We're going to talk a little bit more about how to do that. Some faculty do provide study guides, but you should always use those as tools, like a stepping stone to develop, a deeper study guide than what the faculty provide to you. We also recommend practice exams. That is self-testing. It doesn't have to be anything formal. You can try to work it beyond multiple choice questions. I always tell my students, it's if you have time in between classes, it's asking yourself, okay, how much do I know about this topic? And then literally writing everything you know about that. That is a form of self-testing. Another way to combat the forgetting curve is to use all learning methods and styles, not just those that you're comfortable with. For example, reading, writing, and drawing the information will help. We surveyed faculty a few terms ago when we were developing this presentation. And one of the things that stuck out from one of my faculty is she recommended that certain topics are understood in different ways. So certain topics may be best understood visually, while others through auditory methods, and some may require drawing or schematic representation. So it's whatever works for you, but using multiple ways to learn that information. And that might be new to you at this level. So obviously reach out to us for help with that as well. Another thing is the active recall. So that means retrieving information from memory without looking at the source, rather than just passively reading the information or taking notes and things like that. Examples of this are the common one, flashcards, summarizing material in your own words without looking at your notes, teaching the information to someone else. My faculty always recommend that to students. Try to teach it to your group members if you do a group study. Then there's something called blurting and brain dumping. It's where you write down everything you recall about a specific topic. Like I said, that could take 2 to 5 minutes of your time, and then you could see where any holes are. And then when you have more time, you can go back and study that information a little bit more in depth. Active recall does strengthen your memory. It helps you with long-term retention of the material, and it helps you to identify areas of weakness, and it also helps you improve understanding of the material. Obviously, the examples we've included here it's not everything that you could utilize. So again, you could reach out to your SSA to get more help with that as well. We also have chunking. I know especially FlexGPT faculty on the San Marcos campus really like this method. It's where you break down large pieces of information into smaller manageable pieces of information or chunks of information. Examples include organizing your notes by chapter, topic, subtopic, rather than organizing them linearly. Organizing information based on meaning, patterns, or existing knowledge of the information. All of you have some form of anatomy, either super in-depth or not so much in-depth, but there's something associated with anatomy in some of your classes. So an example of chunking for anatomy, this is a faculty recommendation, read in the text the names, attachments, and innervations of 10 muscles, write what you just read, and then if needed, also draw the structures, innervations of the 10 muscles, and then rewrite it or draw the information again, and then consolidate all the information and draw or write it for memory a final time. And then you'd move on to the next chunk or the next 10 muscles once you've mastered that previous 10. Another example, chunking by region of the body instead of system by system, and then each region will be one study block. So once you've mastered one study block, you move on to the next region of the body. And then you could also subchunk within those regions by bones, muscles, and nerves. And then you could also subchunk by the movement, condition, and palpation of that region as well. So those are examples of chunking for anatomy. And then study guides. So like we said, some faculty will provide study guides, but you should take that information and, kind of go more in depth with your study guide. They're just giving you that as kind of a foundational piece to help develop a study guide. So where do you start? So if you don't have a study guide at all, you have no idea where to start, go to the unit objectives in Blackboard, okay? Turn those into questions. And then as you're going through the unit, try to answer those questions. You could develop multiple choice questions out of that, or you can just do open-ended questions, essay questions, short answer questions. But that's the best place to start if you don't know where to start, because those objectives are telling you by the end of this course, you will know all of this information, right? So turn those into questions versus just using the statements that are there. That will help you kind of develop where to start. If you have text, so reading assignments associated with your courses, you could also, if the layout of the text includes unit objectives in front of each chapter, you could turn those into questions as well. And then you would connect those questions to the ones from the Blackboard unit objectives. Again, creating your own versus using someone else's. So that could be a faculty member or another student in your study group, for example. Again, these are both good places to start, but you should be diving a little bit deeper into each one. So faculty, again, good place to start. Peer-provided study guide. Creating your own study guide is a form of study. It also helps you retain the information versus just being given the information. So maybe if you work in a group, small group, you could each develop, your own type of study guide and then share it with each other. Use pictures, diagrams, or draw your own. Don't just rely on words. Scott will go over I think it was one of our anatomy courses a couple terms ago, study guide that a student shared with us. His included a lot of pictures and diagrams that will help you visualize what you need to remember. And this is also a quote from that specific student who also happened to be a tutor for the course. Study guides for a course like anatomy should consist of more than just words, because anatomy isn't words, it's something physical that can be seen with pictures and diagrams and our own bodies. And then the very first slide that we presented was, resources that you've utilized. Faculty is probably your number one resource that you should be connecting with when you have questions. Attend faculty office hours. They are the front line of your course. They can answer questions. They're the ones teaching the course. When it comes to study guides, you could ask them to review your study guide to let you know if you're on the right track. Okay, but also with the faculty office hours, I think it's important that you show that you've you've made an attempt to learn the material and not just go in there like, how do I make a study guide, right? So it's doing some of the footwork first and then, consulting with faculty during office hours as needed. Okay, so we also have information here that you could also utilize to help build a study guide. These are specific to anatomy. They're available in the library. I think you get a copy of this presentation after, right? Scott, maybe, could be wrong. But these are available at the library website on the student portal. So, and this is Scott's, the study guide example I was referring to.
Yeah, so as Brooke was mentioning, if you caught it, this we wanted to take a couple slides to show you. This comes from a star tutor, a seasoned veteran tutor and this is obviously focusing on anatomy. And you can see the color coding with this and the use of diagrams. I'm not going to go through the anatomy. It's kind of secondary for what we're trying to show you here. But if we go to, and I don't know if I can, yeah, Brooke, I don't think I can advance the slide. There's another example here. Obviously, we're still on before the exam section of the presentation. So it's a combination of, writing the stuff out or text, if you will, using different color coding, using the diagrams, using boxes, graphs, charts, what have you. I think the original study guide for what we sampled from this was like 60 pages long. But this kind of gives you a little idea of how some of this is organized, or at least how, one of our tutors used to do it. Not necessarily saying you need to do things exactly this way, but there might be a few different insights here that maybe you can incorporate into what you're currently putting into your study guides. Okay, AI, hot topic, a lot of conversation about it. So there is an AI committee at the university, and they are working on standardizing policy, if you will, about how to use AI, how not to use AI. When those announcements, if and when those are made, those will be made available to you, of course. Best rule moving forward for the time being is to consult with your faculty. And I think it's important to note this may and probably will vary from course to course, faculty to faculty. So you just want to make sure that you're compliant with whatever their guidelines are for the course. A lot of that, most of it, excuse me, most of it, if not all of it, should be in the syllabi, but if there's any doubt, reach out to your faculty to make sure that you're within the boundaries of what their expectations are, okay? And then that last note, that last bullet point, creating a study guide is a form of study itself. So consider the use of AI when you're using that to, create a study guide or create practice test questions, something like that. Yeah, you can do that within a matter of seconds or, a minute or so, and boom, it's done. But there's something to be said for creating it or doing it, manually, if you will, on your own, because that helps you retain the information. I'm not going to, again, sit here and tell you what you can and can't do with AI. That's up to your faculty and until there's further guidance. But keep in mind, creating this stuff does ingrain it and help you retain the information. Okay. Right. We're still before the exam, and let's talk about practicals. Practice lab. Something that I think is underutilized, underestimated for a lot of first-term students. Frequently around midterms and the end of the term, I hear quite a bit of, I wish I would have utilized that sooner, or I wish I would have utilized open lab time more frequently. Okay. Anything that you can do to replicate the test environment is going to work to your advantage. Not a bad idea to record yourself and watch it back. Um, for any of you that are musicians as a hobby or whatever, amateur musicians, if you record yourself playing an instrument, when you're playing the instrument live, you oftentimes think, okay, this sounds great. I'm doing well. It's awesome. But then when you hear a recording of it, you hear all the little flaws in it, right? So, not unlike, if you're recording yourself, for a practical. So, not a bad idea to do that. Um, One thing I know is beneficial to students talking through it out loud, talking to yourself about what you're doing step by step can also help you, retain the information and ingrain it in you. Another thing you want to look out for is the complacency and the routine. You want to eliminate bias. So if I'm working with the same 2 or 3 people for the entire trimester, we're probably going to know each other's next move, and we're gonna maybe move our arm a second before we should, or we're gonna get too comfortable. It's only natural. So mix it up, work with other people, work with people you don't know, work with, anything you can do to keep yourself a little off balance, because when you go in on game day to be evaluated, you don't know, what you're going to get and who you're going to work with and things like that. So, try to mix it up. Had a faculty member tell me, actually several times, you'd be surprised about how many people don't actually follow the grading rubric, or they overlook certain things on the rubric. So make sure that you are incorporating that during the practice time. And then, of course, trying to plan ahead. Um, if you try to, utilize the time or book something on short notice, it may be kind of difficult. And then it kind of goes back to the using the grading rubric. Make sure you have, the student, the patient, and then the grader for each session, ideally. Organization. Hearing a lot about organization and kind of structuring things and mapping things out. I think some of this was reflected in the word clouds that we did earlier. Um, and this is normal in the first few, not only weeks, but likely months of your first term. It's going to take a little while. But one thing that may be helpful is using a calendar. And what I mean by that is not a flip folder calendar that you tuck away in your bag or your backpack or something. There is something to be said for out of sight, out of mind. Also, with the flip calendars, it tends to only show you 1 week at a time or a few days at a time. A lot of folks find a benefit in using a wall calendar, mounting it on their wall next to their workstation at home. And not only does it show 1 week, it can show an entire month, right? So it's going to be important not to only know what's coming up this week or in the coming days, but you're going to have to plan out and map out, a few weeks at a time, if not more. So that can be beneficial. Some people also like to have um, like a desk calendar that shows a month at a time, with paper or whatever. But um, try using that if you haven't. It can help you keep things organized, and it's always within sight. Another quote that came from multiple faculty when we were putting this together: the utilization of group work. It's fine if you create your own practice test questions on your own, but what if they're all bad questions? So, I can create 5 questions, Brooke can create 5 questions, and Jennifer can create 5, and we've got a 15-question mini exam. Okay. Um, Time management on exams was something that was mentioned during the word clouds as well. So if our practice exam is only going to be 15 questions, we need to make sure that when we do that practice exam, the time ratio is the same. Okay, so simply put, if your exam has, 60 questions and you have 1 hour to complete it, that's 1 question per minute. So if we're doing a 15-question exam, we're only going to have 15 minutes. During group work, the same person should not always be answering the questions or talking all the time, right? So I know some groups will actually identify as a group, okay, who feels the most confident with this content? Who feels the least confident? And they will actually go in reverse order when answering questions. The folks that are a little bit shaky with the content have the opportunity to respond first when discussing the content or working in groups. Um, Another thing is rotating group leaders. If you have kind of a regular group that you meet with once or twice a week for a few hours at a time, go ahead and carve out 10, 15, 20 minutes of the session each week. And that group leader for that week is going to teach the content to the rest of the group, which means that group leader is going to put together a slide deck or a study guide or whatever. And then after those 15 minutes, the rest of the group is going to pick that apart and you're going to go through it. Oh, this was great. I like how you presented this. This slide was helped me to understand things. Or wait, we got to go back to this one. I have no idea what you're talking about here. Let's go through this again type thing. Ideally, you should be able to teach the content to your peers. Hopefully, you can teach the content to people that aren't in the program in an easy to understand way. That's another thing. But group work for sure is underestimated by a lot of first-term students. I don't know anybody that gets through the program by solely doing this, 100% self-study. Now it is up to you to figure out what that ratio is going to be of group study versus self-study. And obviously it's going to depend on the course, and it's going to kind of change a little bit depending on the course in each term. Cumulative exams. If you don't know which exams are going to be cumulative, you should find out eventually. That's going to be a big factor going into your planning. I call this extending your runway. So typically, if in a traditional undergrad program, if you could kind of get away with waiting 1 week before an exam to really start bearing down and studying, in these accelerated programs and all this content and self-directed learning, you're most likely going to have to extend that runway out even further. So with cumulative exams, that's another example of when you're likely going to have to allocate more time to make sure you're covering all the content. So again, whether you're talking about a 15-week course, or if you're talking about, the 7-week subterm courses for a lot of the folks in PT, you're going to want to know which exams are cumulative, which aren't. We talk about knowing the material, I think, a lot, but we don't really understand what that always means. Another quote from another faculty member: it's not good enough to know the material, because your faculty are going to require you to understand the applications of the content. And that's really going to hit, as you progress through your programs. All of your content and your curriculum, like it's all connected term to term. And so you're going to have to rely on, things a term or two ago, relative to your current term, as you move through the program. If you kind of take your program from like a rote memorization standpoint, it will come back to bite you. So understanding the applications of the content is what they're really going to be requiring you to show on a lot of your exams, right? iLearn videos, academic skills, enrichment. There are a ton of iLearn videos. There's a couple ways to get to those. Those are all preloaded. It is in your quick links on your homepage on the left-hand column of your homepage of your MyUSA. I think we have a link in it later at the end of the presentation. The cool thing about the iLearn videos, or one of the cool things, is there's such a broad range of them. There's everything from specific midterm prep, for neuroscience or whatever, to board exam prep, to general study skills, which I know we're kind of doing in this series, but there's just a broad range of videos. There's probably 100 in there. If you haven't taken a look, you might want to. Next slide, please. Okay. During the exam. So moving along here, read the entire question. So we kind of included that on the or the Tips 101, Prep 101. If you don't identify all the key words, it can mislead your answer. Okay, they're going to try and trick you. It's very tempting to kind of read the question, but kind of rush through it at the end because you think you've got it. But make sure that you are reading it completely. Try not to get into the weeds, if you will, or overthink each component of the question. Another thing, I don't think we have this in one of the slides, but when you're reading the question, some folks like to answer the question before they even look at the options. If this is, a multiple choice exam, that kind of reinforces and reaffirms what you already know about the content, as opposed to kind of 90% reading the question, then immediately jumping to all of your options, A, B, C, D, and then kind of getting into the weeds, right? Of, oh, well, maybe this one's right, or this one's right, but this one's also kind of right. And yeah, so it may help to try and answer that, it may help to make sure that you're reading the question completely, then trying to answer it, then looking at your options. We talked about managing the time as far as the practice exam, right? So 60 questions, one question per minute, 30 for 30 questions. Using extra time to check your work. Don't overanalyze or change your answers unnecessarily. It is okay to change your answers, but generally we recommend to trust your gut. Only change the answer if you think you can justify that change. If you misread the question, for example, the first time, or maybe you didn't pick up on a key word or something like that. So yeah, it's okay to change the question, but when in doubt, trust your gut. Okay,
Okay.
Brooke, I think
Yeah.
you've got this one, yeah?
Yep. And this is time for the second passcode or keyword. It's Van Halen. Okay, so like Scott was saying with multiple choice exams, a lot of students, I always recommend to try to answer the question in your own words before looking at the answer choices. Because sometimes when you start looking at the answer choices, you get overwhelmed, because then you get to two that could potentially be, it's one or the other, right? It's 50-50. But students get more comfortable with the questions if they're able to answer in their own words and then look at the answer choices and see which one is most closely related to or exactly what they answered in their own words. A lot of students fall into this trap of answering the question or selecting the choice that's factually true, but it's incorrect because it doesn't answer what's being asked, okay? So that would be an example if you're going back and reviewing the questions and you're like, oh, I need to change this answer because I picked the answer that was true, but it's not answering the question. So that justifies changing the answer. If you have case study exams, read the case multiple times before looking at the questions. And one faculty in particular that I work with for a clinical neuroscience course, she always recommends with the case study exams is reading them a line at a time. Another technique is read the case material, read the case study once, then read the questions, and then read the case materials again. And at that point, you'll typically pick up on keywords from both the questions and the case materials, and you feel more comfortable with the questions being asked related to the case study. And then this back to you, Scott.
Okay. One thing that doesn't really get enough attention, I feel, or we feel, is what happens after the exam. You know, after you take a quiz or you take an exam, there's another one right around the corner, right? So there's not a whole lot of time to really debrief or expend, you know, a lot of bandwidth or emotional energy. But I do think it's worth noting, make sure you identify what the takeaways are, right? And so part of that is an objective analysis. Was your score what you thought it would be? Why or why not? The important word being objective, right? No matter what your score is, you do have to own that score. Doesn't mean you have to be happy with it or you can't be disappointed or frustrated with it. But it is important to own the score, identify what the pressure points are, and then pivot, right? Because you know, there's something else coming right around the corner. Try to avoid the black and white thinking. This is a long, well, these are long programs, right? They're going to be, you know, bumps in the road. There's going to be peaks and valleys and all that other stuff. You know, each exam, each quiz, each whatever, it's really one step in the process, okay? Something that I find myself doing quite often, especially with students kind of in the middle of the program or towards the tail end, is what I call like a zoom out exercise. And as a student in these demanding programs and these accelerated programs, it's very easy to get tunnel vision and it's very easy to get short-sighted and kind of living day to day, quiz to quiz, assignment to assignment, exam to exam. But remember why you joined these programs. Remember why you made these sacrifices. Remember why, you know, you want to be a PT, you want to be an OT, what have you. These are really callings, right? People don't decide to go into these programs on a whim usually. So if you get to kind of micromanaging of, well, this quiz score was a disaster type thing or whatever, and you ruminate over it, it can just kind of grow and kind of derail you from the bigger picture. Okay. I know it's easier said than done, but try not to compare yourself to others too much. I'm not saying competition is bad. I think it can be healthy even. But you don't want to base what you're doing and, you know, using that objective analysis compared to other people, right? So you want to establish what your standards are. You're going to have, you know, content areas that you feel good about, you know, and where you should be in certain areas versus others. And it's going to be a little bit different for everybody. So make sure that you understand how you expect to perform, you know, on these exams. And then another thing that's not really talked about is what is your definition of failure, right? So, you know, that could be very, very different for different people. And, you know, when we talk about failure, it doesn't necessarily need to be a 59% or lower, right? Or, you know, or a D or whatever. So yeah, stick to your goals and establish your standards. And by defining these things from the get-go, it should help with that objective analysis component. Faculty office hours. Again, often underutilized. Your faculty do make themselves available to you. Faculty office hours is not something that you need to do every week. It's also not something you need to do maybe in every course, but it is it's an important layer of support. It's an important resource. Um, Obviously, your faculty are in charge of the course, and they know what's coming up on the next exam, and they know, your individual performance in the course and your strengths and weaknesses, whatever. And so when you're meeting, especially like one-on-one, and not like a, open office hours type group session virtually or whatever, but when you're actually meeting with your faculty one-on-one, there can be some important insights and information and supports that are given that you typically won't find in a lecture or in a group setting like that. The one thing I would caution, make sure that you go to any faculty office hours prepared. Typically, you don't want to just go in and say, hey, how can I do better in your course? You want to go in with some items. You want to go in with, some bullet pointed objectives here. You should be able to offer your faculty, your lead faculty, here are the areas that I feel comfortable with, and here's why. Here are some areas that I'm struggling with, and I'm not sure why, but here are some things I'm running into. Um, here's a sample, here's 10-page sample of my study guide. I know some students before the faculty office hours will email, a sample of the study guide so they can review it and get feedback on it. Here are 10 practice test questions our group came up with, and we'd appreciate your insight. Those types of things. You're going to get much more out of the meeting if you go in with some items like that, as opposed to just kind of having a casual, unscripted conversation about the course or the exam, what have you. Another thing, you can have these anytime, but typically a lot of the faculty office hours happen, prior to major assignments, exams, or right after, especially if there's not a debrief or post-exam, insight given by the faculty during the lecture portion.
Okay, I think, sorry, there was a question in the chat about getting marked here for attendance. You being here is your attendance. So Hideki will likely pull a report to see who attended the live session. If you're watching the recording after the fact, you will have to submit the passcodes, which brings us to the final passcode, which is Snoop Dogg. Okay. So like I said earlier, Scott and I, surveyed faculty a couple terms ago and asked them, for tips that we could share with you all in preparing for exams, taking exams, and then after the fact. Again, you should be able to teach the material to someone else. It depends on who that someone else is, right? If you're in a group session, it's, if you're comfortable with a specific topic, it's teaching it to your peers. If you're at home and you're with your best friend, roommate, be like, hey, I want to teach this material to you, see if you can understand it in the way that I'm explaining it to you. Those types of things. That is probably the number one thing that I've gotten feedback from faculty for, is being able to teach it to someone else. Again, engaging in the material multiple modalities, visually, auditory, and kinesthetic, not just the one that you're most comfortable with. Again, going back to a few slides ago, where understanding the material is being able to, at some point memorize things, but also being able to apply those things, right? That's the whole point of these programs, is the application piece. Study the material you're at least comfortable with the most. Again, back to that distributed practice. You're going to study it multiple times leading up to the exams, but depending on what the material is and how comfortable you are with it, it will be how many times you, depend on how many times you study for it. Anatomy, a lot of students struggle with that. Try studying it a little each day and not just right before the exam. And that term, a little each day, is going to depend on your struggles as a student. It's not cookie cutter, is what I'm trying to get at. And then again, utilizing faculty office hours early. A lot of faculty, especially on this campus, from what I've heard, students don't utilize it in the term one. The faculty are here for you. The prior chief academic officer would present at orientation on our campus. And the thing that always stuck with me that he would say is faculty look at you all as colleagues in training. They're not here to fail you. They're not here to make things hard for you. They're here to guide you. So utilize those faculty office hours. And someone said I've taught my dog almost everything I've ever learned. So teach your dog too. Part of understanding the material is also hearing yourself say it out loud, right? So I think there's benefit in that as well. So thank you for sharing that. And you got 5 laugh emojis on that one. Okay.
Was it Snoop Dogg? Was it Snoop Dogg or?
No, yeah.
Just to clarify? Okay.
Tips from students. So we also reached out to students that had been in the program. I had a anatomy professor that would survey his students at the end of every term. And the number one thing they would come back with is, I wish I would have started studying earlier for exams versus cramming the night before. We know you're going to do it. Don't do it. Try really hard not to do it. Okay. Utilizing group study effectively. So that's being proactive versus reactive. So you're going to, okay, we have a group session going. Let's prepare for the lab or the lecture that's coming up tomorrow, right? What do we need to know? Let's take a look at that material. So when we go into lecture, it's not our first time hearing the material. If you're more comfortable with individual, studying or studying on your own, do an independent study before you go to the group study, right? And then when you're done with the group study, go home and look at, the things you talked about during that group session. Review your notes as soon as you can after class. Rewrite them if you need to. We know that a lot of information is being passed, so you probably have like some sloppy looking notes. Go back through them and kind of translate them into like a cleaner notebook or a cleaner sheet of paper in a way that you understand them. But the key here is to do it as soon after class as you can, right? So you're not forgetting things. And then reflect on them consistently throughout the unit leading up to that exam. Utilize tutoring effectively. That's also to say supplemental instruction for the DPT students. If you haven't looked into that yet, we highly recommend doing that. If you meet with me and you're a DPT student, the first thing I'm going to ask you is, have you been attending SI for IFS? Utilizing tutoring effectively. So they're going to show you, they're going to be proactive versus reactive, right? That doesn't mean you can't go into a tutoring session and ask questions about previous material, but they are also preparing you for that next lab or that next lecture. Again, don't cram for exams. Give yourself time to relax the night before. Again, you shouldn't be studying, begin studying the night before the exam. Again, seek help early on, talk to your professors early on, formulate questions before meeting with them. This is all repeats of what we presented, but this is also what the students have told us or shared with us, things that they wish they would have done to ensure their success. And then we have accommodations. Don't forget, we have a great accommodations department. If you do have a diagnosed learning disability, they can assist you with getting testing accommodations. If you have not looked into this, we highly recommend doing it as soon as possible because it could take up to 2 weeks for approval for this. The accommodations email is here. If you want to see what is required to receive accommodations, like what documentation, you can go to Student Services and Accommodations on your student portal. Or you can email me for San Marcos and Scott for St. Augustine, and then whoever your SSA is, you can connect with them about seeking out accommodations for test taking. And now we're up to the end. Which of these strategies did you find helpful and or do you plan to use to support your academic success? Please select all that apply. So we talked about study groups. We talked about using open practice lab. We talked a lot about faculty office hours, tutoring and supplemental instruction, comparing yourself to others. We talked a lot about study guides and then practice exams, and then the benefit of studying the same subject multiple times a week. And hopefully you're not planning to use none of these strategies. But I think it's worth noting that faculty office hours did go up, so we appreciate that. I know your faculty will also appreciate meeting with you all. And then let me see if there's anything in the chat. If you have questions, also you can hop off mute if you have any questions. And then
Yeah, the only thing,
go ahead.
if you have questions, if it's of a personal nature, we would recommend that you speak directly, privately with your respective SSA. But if it's kind of just general overarching stuff, we'd be happy to entertain that.
And then are there other strategies you would recommend? So is there something we didn't go over that you utilize and you think other students would benefit from?
And just for the record, I don't think anybody benefits from Katy Perry.
Well,
It's where Brooke and I disagree.
yeah, no, I don't disagree with you at all. So if kind of,
you guys are funny. Let's see here, drawing. You know what? I'm going to take this opportunity to tell you a quick story about that. I might have done this at the St. Augustine orientation. I can't remember, but I know I've told this story throughout the years, but your self-care routine, I know it's maybe a different topic, but if you try to rely on what you used in undergrad, it may not work to quite the extent during this in this kind of environment. And student that I worked with, long story short, took up an old hobby from high school, which was painting. And what we found is, walking her dog in the park every day wasn't really enough. And she was always thinking about what she had to do. But when she took up an old hobby, we found out that doing something creative actually distracted her enough, and she felt so much more refreshed. And I'm not saying you guys need to take up painting, but I'm just saying you might need to be open to adjusting kind of your self-care routine, or incorporating other things, to kind of give you a little more traction. I do notice that somebody put Kate, or more than one person put in Katy Perry. Not sure how I feel about that on this word cloud, but
there's
what
also
else?
screaming and crying, so maybe that is similar to Katy Perry, but I don't know.
Rewards, meditation.
I've made a note of a few, Scott, and we also use this to kind of help develop future presentations. And then we also use it to share with the other SSAs, and maybe that, these are techniques they could look into for when they're meeting with you, their specific student. So thank you for sharing this stuff with us. I've made a note of
3D
quite
anatomy,
a few.
3D anatomy,
Yeah.
yes. Sorry, I'm just.
No. Are there other strategies you would like to know more about? So the last one was anything you would recommend as a new student finishing up this presentation. Okay, thank you. No, we can end the call now. And the note-taking one, there is a piece, I think it's already passed, the Skills for Success that Tyler from the Austin campus does.
Yep.
Or maybe it's Hideki. There is a note-taking Skills for Success. We don't know if it's already happened. Can't remember.
You should have access to the recording and or the slide deck shortly after each of the presentations.
And then a lot of these things, you can meet with your respective SSA and kind of dive in, because not everything is going to be cookie cutter, right? So reach out to your SSA, have that one-on-one meeting, talk about what's working, what's not working, and then go from there. A lot of students will realize they need help after that first exam. So if you think you need help right now, reach out for it now, before that first exam. So don't wait. I see Taylor Swift on there. Doom scrolling, set a timer for yourself. Okay. Okay, so we're over time. So I
Yeah.
think the next slide is questions. So, again, you'll get a copy of this presentation with these links. We have academic support where you can sign up for tutoring, supplemental instruction, student wellness for those of you that cry and scream. I mean, there's benefits in doing that, but we also have a student wellness page that has additional resources to help you manage stress. Again, Scott mentioned iLearn. OT students, we have program exam strategy video and presentation slides. Check that out. SLP students, we have Praxis exam review and study guide, and then some additional resources for you there provided by your program. And that is it. So thank you for, I'm going to stop sharing, spending the evening with us. We hope you thought it was helpful to some extent, and just reach out if you have questions to your local SSA.
Yeah, thanks for hanging. And again, we're a few weeks into the term, and so your baseline study routines are going to start to solidify and become a little bit more established in the coming weeks. But one thing that the SSAs are pretty good at is kind of objectively going through that with you to help identify where those the pressure points are, what you can kind of lean into a little more or a little less. And it really helps to kind of talk it through too. I know you guys are thinking about this in your heads and stuff, but kind of mapping it out and talking it through is beneficial. So for the SSAs, if you don't know already, you can use the auto link or the link in their auto signature of any of their emails, and that gives you direct access to your respective SSA's calendar. And you can drop that meeting in their calendar. You can do the virtual meetings. We can share screens. We can show you stuff in, the portal, all kinds of good stuff. So feel free to drop those meetings in if you need them in the coming weeks.
I see somebody had their hand raised. Jasmine, I think.
Yeah, hi. I didn't get a chance to type it in, but sometimes when I go to the store with my mom, like she'll go to TJ Maxx, I will literally pick up like the skull or whatever bones are on the shelf, and I will start like naming them, like, oh, this is the mandible. And I got really mad because some of them were labeled incorrectly. And I literally showed her and I was like, no, this is wrong. Like, this is not correct. We can't buy this. And she like was like, okay, that's enough. But to me, that's helpful when I can do
Yeah.
like real world things
Yeah.
and like explain something. Like right now, my
So,
coworker has like something wrong with her ear, and I was like, oh, is it this? And I just like went into it, and it
so
really
if
helped me
I'm
because like, oh, I know this.
if
Yeah.
I'm reading between the lines here, you're asking us to take money from the budget to do some excursions to TJ Maxx, right?
Could maybe
We'll look
happen.
into
Yeah.
it.
No, but I think that's a good point, Jasmine. Like, and then just you telling your mom, right? It kind of builds that confidence. Like, I know this is incorrect. This is what it really is, right? So I think that's helpful.
Yeah, it
Mm.
was
Kudos to
kind
your
of like
mom
a.
too for being super, super patient and yeah, okay.
She's
I don't know
really
what you just said,
over.
but
She's really over my transcriptions all over the house because I'll just start writing things and she's like, this is not English. You cannot put this here. And she'll like take my post-it notes down and I'm like, okay, well, we tried.
okay,
Looks
sorry.
like
Somebody in the chat,
Caitlin,
sorry. Somebody in the chat asked about ComPsych. You can access ComPsych from the student portal under, oh my goodness,
Student Services tab, counseling submenu option
counseling.
on the left-hand side.
Yep.
ComPsych, it's 24/7. The only thing it costs is your time. Another, thing to kind of keep in your back pocket. And, it can be beneficial. Unfortunately, again, it kind of goes in line with some other resources where, we frequently hear, I wish I would have taken advantage of that resource a little sooner type thing. So yeah, ComPsych Student Services tab. The sub-menu options in the Student Services tab is very lengthy. There's like 20 or 30 of them there on the left-hand margin, but there's a lot of useful stuff in there. So a lot of the things we talked about, wellness center, tutoring, SI, accommodations, counseling, it's all under the Student Services tab.
Any other questions? And like I said, Hideki will be sending out, just like he did with the other sessions, he'll be sending out a copy of the presentation as well, so you can watch it back or reach out to your SSA if you have questions about anything.
Thanks for hanging with us, guys. Stick with it. It's okay to feel a little anxious, a little overwhelmed. Things are still kind of new. Hopefully, after not only this presentation, but some of the others, you realize there are multiple layers of support. We're here to, help and assist any way we can. Just let us know. And everybody stay warm out there. See ya.
All right. Bye, everybody.